Your golf ball is the most technologically advanced, or it's not. Your golf ball is either the most consistent, or it's not. It's the most trusted, or it's not. The fact is, it's either Titleist, the best performing golf ball in the world, or it's not. Prove it for yourself. Titleist, the #1 ball in golf. What will you play?
I've never seen anything like it before, and to attempt to hit the ball out of there is pure madness.
The winner of the gold medal and the champion golfer of the year is Cameron Smith.
This is the one that I've always wanted to win since I was a little kid. So it just feels pretty amazing to be able to get it done today.
It's amazing that it's my destiny to be the first Aussie to win. Just incredible.
Hello, welcome to episode 91 of Playing from the Tips, the weekly podcast from Golf Australia magazine, previewing all the tournaments that matter each week and a bit of broader discussion as well. Regular listeners will note that I'm not Jimmy Emanuel, but in fact Rod Murray. The reason being that concurrent men's and women's Australian Opens don't organise themselves, people, and Jimmy is, I can assure you, neck deep in the day-to-day reality of a big-time golf tournament. And while Jimmy's busy, Logue has been rogue, but we finally managed to connect with him. And sans Jimmy, we will bravely push on with this week's episode. Logue, welcome. Looking forward to getting some very early impressions from you from on-site at Victoria and Kingston Heath Golf Clubs.
Thanks, Rod. Yes, I'm down here in the media centre. I'm actually looking directly at Jimmy, but he's ignoring me as if he's like just too busy. He's big timing me. I think he's big timing me.
He is big timing you, but he's probably showing you there, like, is what actual work actually looks like, which is perhaps why you're not recognising it immediately. For you, it does sound like he's knee deep in it down there. I must say, I've not heard him be this kind of stressed for quite a while. So we wish him all the best for this week. Oh, pardon me. Now, before we look ahead to the week that is to come at Kingston Heath in Victoria, as well as a quick peek at the Asian Tour in Qatar, we like to update our results so far. Look, that's Jimmy's job, and I was going to say I don't have the numbers, but he has sent them to me. So let me quickly read out 6 top 10s and 1 win last week. That was Matt Burns with Elvis Smiley. That means we're at 31 wins and 170 top 10s. Does that sound right to you, Like? That's all the successful.
That sounds like the sort of numbers that are unmatched in any golf tipping podcast where the one host is in the media centre at the Australian Open and another host is in Sydney podcast studio.
Exactly, as I was going to say. As Jimmy himself might say if he were here, clear winners in the category of golf tournament preview podcast, where the main host has been caught up organising the national championship and had to hand over duties to a co-host. Before we get started, Logue, what caught your eye last week?
Well, obviously, Elvis's win in the PGA was pretty special. I think that the win in the WA Open a few weeks ago was sent a signal. It was an important stepping stone, but this is really significant, and it changes everything for him. Whereas the WA Open was more about it was confidence building, put him in a good position in the Australian Tour money list, but the PGA really makes a big difference with exemptions and invites that he's going to get all around the world, and gives him great opportunities to play, not the least of which is the European Tour card, which he just missed out on in Q School. So that didn't take long to rectify itself, did it?
No, it didn't. I think Mike Clayton tweeted about the irony of that. I think Ewan said it to him in the post-round interview, and I think I'd concur. Everybody's been kind of waiting for this for a long time, and the pressure must have been awful. And he didn't do it easy, did he? I was impressed with the way he held up on the back nine when he didn't hit it very well, particularly given the company he was in. I thought that was an enormous statement from and by Elvis, perhaps as much to himself as anything else. Cam Smith and Mark Leishman are no slouches, are they?
Yeah, that was extremely impressive. Like, he really set up the win on the front nine, didn't he? I think he made 4 birdies on the front nine, just to give himself a bit of breathing space. But boy, did he need it. He was in all sorts of trouble all the way home, but 9 pars. It was Faldo-like, really, on the back nine, getting those pars done, lots of up and downs, and none more impressive than on the final hole. When you're behind a tree, I'm just thinking bogey, but he'd driven it behind a tree. It was still a long way out, but managed to fashion a shot that got him greenside. And when these guys get greenside, they're they're just thinking they're getting up and down more often than not. And but under that sort of pressure, Rod, he probably wasn't even thinking about blading the crowd.
No, indeed, as you famously mentioned to me once at a professional tournament. He wasn't even thinking about that bunker, Loke said to me as we watched the guy pitch onto the green. Very good stuff. It's a delicious idea, like that the Jekyll and Hyde of Elvis Smiley is Mickelson and Faldo.
Oh, yeah.
It's, pardon me, marvellous stuff. All right. On to this week. We'll come to Qatar, the only other tournament that we're going to touch on this week shortly. But before that, of course, the Australian Open will take centre stage. And I suspect, Logan, as much, and if people listen to this show regularly, they won't be surprised to hear us talk about as much for the courses as anything else. My instinct is Australian golf is on a bit of a roll at the moment. Last week's tournament was really good. I found myself on Saturday looking at the leaderboard going, this is really good, compelling sort of golf. Mm-hmm. We'll have it again this week with the same sort of feel, but on two golf courses that I think the rest of the world will want to look at as well. Thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Kingston Heath has a reputation that's almost sort of outsized for its, it's well known here, but I think people overseas really know it as one of the 2 or 3 courses in Australia that are, have a very significant name on the world stage. So, we didn't get a lot of Kingston Heath when the Australian Open was last down here and the roles were reversed with Victoria and Kingston Heath. This week we get a lot of Kingston Heath and that's a very exciting prospect for viewers all around the world. And there will be a lot of interest and, really it's that thing of put this event on the best golf courses in Australia and it can only, result in, good things. And the field, I think, reflects that. It's pretty exciting field.
Look, it is indeed. We would look at it if it was a PGA Tour field and call it weak. But I think what we've found, and I think this is what Australia is plugging into, the real golf fans of the world, the hardcore golf fans in America and the UK, whose interest is the Sandbelt, will come to watch. They'll be exposed to a bunch of golfers that they perhaps might not otherwise have been from the European Tour in particular. And all of it's just to the good of the global game. And so I think it'll fulfill an important role there. For those who haven't been, Logan, I haven't been for a long time. In fact, I don't think I've actually played Kingston Heath, though I have played Victoria. Give us a little taste of these two courses. I know that courses are a particular interest of yours, and I'm sure these two rate pretty highly with you. Differences and similarities, and what impact or what part do you think they might play in the actual unfolding of the event and the end result?
Well, the playing conditions and the playing surfaces at both courses are quite similar. And there's not a lot of rain forecast this week, and the weather's been actually very good for the agronomy and everything down here in the lead up to the event. I think we're going to get a little bit of rain on Saturday, but as far as how they both play, it's going to be very similar. Similar grasses, similar firmness. The big point of difference between the two courses, I think, is that Victoria has a little bit more movement to the land. It's right next to Royal Melbourne, and that little part of the Sandbelt definitely has the best land of any course in the Sandbelt between Royal Melbourne and Victoria. Kingston Heath, on the other hand, is a much flatter site, but it makes marvellous use of the subtle slopes. Like there's a number of holes. For such a flat site, it's got a surprising number of sort of semi-blind shots and blind shots, or shots where you end up blind unless you hit a really good tee shot. That's just part of the strategy of Kingston Heath and what makes it quite fascinating. And then, the green complexes at both venues are incredibly challenging. I mean, they're not courses that all of our listeners, I think, are going to be pretty familiar with both venues because, you hear about them written about and talked about endlessly.
Yeah. And starting to see them again, which is really good. As you said, this is the second time in, I think, about 4 years that we've been to Melbourne with the Australian Opens. And they do have a different special sort of buzz. I know you've only walked on site. It's only Tuesday. Is there a buzz in the air that's maybe different to when the tournament's here in Sydney, which you've been to many times as well?
I think so. With the main event being at Kingston Heath, and everyone talks about Kingston Heath being a small property. Well, yeah, perhaps by Melbourne standards, it's a small property, but they somehow had enough room to build a whole other 9-hole pitch and putt course.
Yes, indeed.
And they've got like two really large practice fairways, one of which is just the tented village this week, and the other one is being used as the actual practice fairway, in addition to, a championship 18 holes. But, the actual footprint of the championship course isn't huge, which makes it pretty easy to get around the property. So I think that's going to be a really good spectator experience.
Yeah.
The vibe is good. The course looks magnificent. The actual fairways are, just that lovely colour that you get here, where it's not sort of hyper green. It's got a little bit of yellow in it, but very uniform, and the cooch is just laying down perfectly. So you're going to get a lot of run. There's no bad lies on the fairway, but just off the fairway, it sort of breaks up really quickly, and you get those wispy, sandy lies where it just sort of crumbles under your feet, and occasionally there's a bit of hard pan there. So, it's one of those places where you've got to look at your ball and assess what it's going to do when you're in the rough. But if you can keep it on the playing surfaces, then I don't know if there's any better way to play golf, for your ball to be presented to.
Yes, many of us, I think, would say it's how golf is supposed to be in many ways. It will look very different for people tuning in internationally to what you see quite often from professional golf tournaments, both in Europe and America, which get the predominance of the coverage. What can we learn as viewers, if we're not architecturally inclined, by watching these extraordinarily talented players this coming week in both the men's and women's fields?
Well, hopefully we'll see, particularly with the women's field, I think we'll see what makes watching golf on TV such a joy is where the ball lands and where the ball finishes isn't the same place. You'll see it sort of careen around on the greens and certainly run out on the fairways. So, I think that's what we're hoping to see. And it does look firm enough that we'll get a bit of that. So, I'm looking forward to that.
What sorts of golfers do well on Sandbelt courses? I think you've kind of pointed to one of the keys of it. There's a lot of imagination involved prior to execution. That's always been my feeling.
And look, the sort of golfer like a Cam Smith is going to do well, isn't he? I just love the way he plots his way around. He never seems like he's one of the best ball strikers in the world, but his misses are in good spots, and he gives himself every chance of recovering. And then he's just got that brilliant short game and a pretty good recovery game to make do. And Minwoo Lee as well, I think is sort of player who's just his sheer length and his ability to recover from some dodgy places that he finds himself in really suited. I almost feel like Minwoo plays better in situations where he's not hitting it out of the middle of the fairway with a 8-iron or 9-iron every shot, but where he's more up alongside the greens in odd positions where he's got to hit a wedge and use his imagination. I think that's a sort of one long player and one long enough player that fits the mold that'll work around these places.
Indeed. Interesting what you say about Minwoo. Very much like in the Bubba Watson mold, I feel. Exactly that thing.
Yeah.
A straightforward 9-iron from the middle of fairway is not interesting enough to catch his attention, but the hooked wedge from right of the 10th fairway in the playoff at the Masters, he hits an amazing shot. And Minwoo is somewhat like that as well. I agree with you, sort of in that sense. Amongst the women, will the courses play differently for the women? We know that there's differences in the way the top men and the top women hit the ball. Will the courses play differently? I assume the answer is yes. And then in what sort of way? I think you alluded to this earlier.
Well, the ball running around is going to be a little bit more of a challenge for the women. We've seen in past years with the dual event that they've probably gone a little bit easy with the pin positions to accommodate that. If conditions get particularly fiery, and there's a bit of wind forecast as well. I think it's going to get up to about 25 k's an hour at times. So if it dries out and you've got that bit of wind and the pin positions are a little bit tucked, I think that's going to be a challenge just to stop the ball for some of the players hitting longer irons or even hybrids into these greens. Whereas the men, hitting short irons and wedges are probably going to be okay and be able to control their ball. They might get surprised by the odd shot, But the major difference, I think, is we're going to see what happens when the ball lands on the greens and just controlling the ball as it comes into the greens.
A firm and fast Kingston Heath in particular on a hot summer's day, perhaps with a northerly blowing when it gets hot. No place for the faint-hearted, is it? That is some really difficult golf in an Australian Open. If we were to get that on Sunday, we might see some extraordinarily entertaining golf.
Absolutely. I don't think there's any northerlies forecast. I was looking at just that.
Yes.
And we've got some southerlies and the odd little cloudy patch and a thunderstorm, I think, forecast for Saturday, but that's, obviously it's a long way away. But yeah, I don't think we're going to have a super hot week. But it'll be challenging still, in the way that, golf in Melbourne is incredibly varied from morning to afternoon and from day to day as well.
Yeah, just
even with the southerly.
Yeah, and just the challenge of the shots being faced that'll be unfamiliar, even to our Australian players who've played here many times before. They don't play a lot of this golf, do they? They've got a bit of an advantage because they can perhaps remember how to play it more quickly or relearn the experience. They don't play a lot of this sort of golf when they're out on the world stage, do they? So for them, it's a bit of a relearning experience as well.
No, it should be a treat. I think that's one of the reasons most of our players look forward to coming back home. They play championship golf on some of our best courses.
Yeah, and meat pies. Meat pies don't go astray for most of them when they get here as well. You mentioned Cam Smith.
Meat pies in the media centre, Rod. I'm not sure.
Did you say no meat pies?
I think Jimmy's in charge of this joint as well, but it's
not for long.
It's seriously, there's no meat pies. There's not even a fridge.
Well, it's only Tuesday, so let's give him a chance to see. And I'm not there this year, so frankly, I don't really care. You mentioned Cam Smith and Min Woo Lee. Who else does your mind immediately turn to? There are some really marquee name players in this field, aren't there?
Indeed, there are. Cam Smith, Min Woo. We've got Joachim Neiman, of course, coming back, defending champion. I saw him walking around. He's looking pretty fit. His game at various times this year was really on song. I think he was probably the strongest player on LIV at various times during the year. He's back. He's looking pretty sharp. Cameron Davis, a bit of local interest there. He's had a reasonably good year. But I think we'll see, when Australians come home and reset, good things can happen. But certainly we saw that with Mark Leishman, who's also in the field, Lucas Herbert, who's just coming off a win, which would have been very confidence building. But I think you alluded to this earlier, but there's also some overseas players that Australians wouldn't have often had the opportunity to see, but might have been a bit curious about, like your Victor Perez and Harry Higgs, that would have seen on Netflix. And certainly an interesting player to have out here. And Jordan Smith from England, who I might have tipped once or twice this year. He hasn't done very well by me, but a quality player.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, if you want to go and see what really good quality ball striking looks like, Jordan Smith had one that you'd park behind at the range if you're going to be down there, because it's only at the other end of the hole that sort of costs him. He's a fabulous ball striker, just doesn't get it in the hole perhaps as well as some of the others, and good fiery player too. I was always wary of the co-sanction of the Australian Open with the European Tour, my fear being that it would just become one of the national opens that the European Tour goes to and lose some of its cash. I don't think that's happened. I think I might have jumped the gun there. What's your feeling now? And then we'll come to the women's game, the women's Open.
I've gone on about this all the time that, the Australian Open is a tournament where all of the Australian players get to play, and the best of our players come home to play, and we have one or two invites who you put as the marquee players, and their names go up on the billboards, and you get the crowds in, and it's a bit of a novelty. And an Australian growing up with an interest in golf gets to know the household names in Australian golf, and has the opportunity to see the best in the world. And for me, growing up, that was, from one year to another, you'd always have Norman coming home. You'd always have our second tier of players coming home. And then you'd have the likes of, Bernard Langer or Seve come out, or Tom Watson, or, going back a bit further, Jack Nicklaus and Gary Player. So generations of Australians, the vehicle for them to see the best players in the world, the very best players in the world, it has been the Australian Open. We don't have that in this event, and we haven't really had that for some time. We've had some really good players come out. I think, when would have been the last time we had a world number one play? Spieth?
Possibly, yeah. Would have been, yeah. Probably, yeah.
Rory wasn't quite number one when he came and won.
But somebody of that ilk. I mean, you could probably take half a dozen players and put them in that same category that you're talking about, I think, whether they were world number one or what. But yes, I think we all know sort of.
But looking down this field, I think it hasn't been damaged at all. In fact, it's been enhanced by the European Tour, I've got to admit. Like the bottom half might have been, full of local players previously, which is great for them and great experience. But I've got to admit, it's probably a little bit more interesting to see these European Tour players who we know from leaderboards and from highlights and KO on the TP World Tour. But, now to get to see them in the flesh, I think is really great. And I think we should be grateful that they've come down here as well and made the trip at the end of the year when a lot of other players are just having a bit of a rest.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are some really intriguing and interesting players. If you watch the European Tour coverage during the year, you really do get to see some interesting golf and emerging golfers. Those who are in that camp would have seen the Højgaard twins long before anybody in America or elsewhere was exposed. And that's the joy of watching. And I think Australia and the Australian Open fits nicely into that.
Titleist is the number one ball in golf. Yes, being number one is a number, and more players trust the Pro V1 or Pro V1X than all other golf balls combined. But being number one is more than a number. It's a mindset. It's a relentless mission to design and manufacture the best performing golf balls in the game, so you can chase whatever your number one is. Titleist, the number one ball in golf.
We've talked about the men, but of course, concurrent Australian Opens, both the men's and women's. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the issues that you kind of alluded to when talking about the course and how it plays differently and some of those issues. But among the women, we've got some really good names. And in fact, more so than the men's, we've got some of the very top women's golfers in the world here from Australia. So Hannah Green is the one that I immediately think of that stands out. Who else will people sort of recognise in the field? Then we might get some thoughts on what sort of golf and what sort of golfer this might work for.
Yeah, we've got Ashley Buhai returning. Aussie Ash, as I like to think of her, after 2 Australian Open wins. It's great to see her out here again. I think you're a big Ash Buhai fan, aren't you, Rod?
I really am.
She's got a fantastic golf swing.
Well, people forget what a phenom she was. At the age of 14, she was winning on the Ladies European Tour. She may have even won the South African Women's Open. She won by Ashley Simon then before she was married. And yes, it didn't feel like she'd lived up to expectations about her in recent years, but we forget at the age of 14, she's not that old now. I make the same mistake with Lydia Ko and Lexi Thompson. They've been around for so long. You think of them as older than they are. She's not that old. And of course, she's really come into her own, Ashley Buhai, and you're right. I think she's got a fabulous rhythm to her golf. It's a joy to watch.
Yeah. And all that time, she was a frequent visitor to Australia as well. And she's won her Opens here at pretty different venues as well. So, very versatile player. Hannah Green, as you mentioned as well, I think is one to watch, and our standout player this year on the international stage. She must be coming into this Australian summer with more confidence than she's ever had, I'd imagine, and would be really looking to assert herself. I think our best women players have felt a lot of pressure in the last 10 years to win the National Open.
Very much.
Would you agree?
Oh, very much so. Very much so. Much more so than the men, because we have less numbers of women competing on the world stage of the world who have had at the very top end. But they've brought it on themselves in that way. It's a good and healthy thing. But I agree, it must feel intense. Look, all of our top male players have experienced the same thing when they've come home. Cam Smith's been going through it this summer. The expectation each of the 3 weeks he's teed up so far is that he would win. An expectation. Few players get that privilege and honour, but of course it does come, as you say, the potential downsides can be not so pleasant for. But I feel like Hannah's gone to that level where she will embrace that and feed off that rather than feel it as a pressure. I think the same is probably true of Min Ji, and I think Grace Kim probably fits in that as well. So for them, I think the last few years, you're right, But in particular, Hannah, this year, I feel she once told me in an interview that she thinks about the Australian Women's Open as the equal of any of the women's majors. And I believe her, and I believe that she does still feel that. She's a fiercely proud Australian. Anybody who watched the Olympics would know that she's genuinely invested. And I think she wants this trophy as much as any other trophy in the world. And if she could only have one of the 6, the 5 majors in this one, she may pick this. Not guaranteed, but she might.
No, I agree. Yeah, that's absolutely the case. And as you say, Grace Kim as well. I think we'll be looking forward to seeing her, but also, Steph Kyriakou had a great year, and she's back to play as well. I think these courses really suit Steph. She gets good value for her shots here, and just that brilliant short game and fantastic putting. When she gets hot with the putter, it's kind of unstoppable. So, desperately close to a major this year as well, which was really exciting and a little bit unexpected. But she'll be coming into this Australian summer with more confidence than she's ever had. Grace Kim, I'm not sure. Maybe I think she might need a couple more seasons. But she's had her near misses in Australia. The Women's PGA a couple of years ago, and down here when it was at these joint venues as well. She missed out both times. She came second in both those events.
I think you might be right about that. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
But I would say the same about Grace, and I would have said the same before she went to the LPGA, and then she surprised us by winning, and I think herself. She surprised me even more when she won the second time, I thought, and it may be that Grace Kim is a little bit like Steve Allen. There's an element of the smiling assassin about it, isn't there? He's got that sort of baby face, Steve Allen, but an intense competitor. There might be a bit of the same about Grace, and she does like the Sandbelt, and her style of golf really does suit it. So I think she missed a fairway in probably 2000. Well, Grace Kim's not going to be born in the 19s, is she? She hasn't missed a fairway for a very long time. Really straight hitter and an extremely reliable game, as you say. Steph, I really like the idea of she's that player who, when she makes 2 birdies, every chance she'll make 9 of them. If she gets hot, unbelievable to watch. It doesn't always happen. And sometimes her other golf, her not best golf, can be really quite poor. But if she gets going, and I think she would have learned an awful lot from that Evian Championship you mentioned there, where she was right, and it played in the last group on Sunday. Just extraordinary experience. So, yes, I wouldn't rule Steph out this week. It'll be kind of about the start. If she shoots 66 on the first day, look out. Steph Kyriakou is going to be there late Sunday. Not as many international visitors as we might like for the Women's Australian Open, and particularly we got used to the LPGA co-sanctioning the event when it was in Adelaide and some of the amazing fields we got there. But there are some international names. I wanted to ask you specifically about, Danielle Kang. These are the players listed on the Australian Open website as the marquee players. Danielle Kang, obviously. Jie Shin, who I know you're as big a fan of as I am in the game, and she's always part of the tipping. You tip who you tip. And Jie, because she's always a chance to win. But Jenny Shin from Korea, she's been a fabulous visitor to these shores in recent times, hasn't she? And a really interesting player who does extraordinary work on social media, which is to the good of both the country and the game.
Yeah, she's got a really great profile on social media, and she's a good follow, and at times probably a little bit divisive, but that's what makes a good follow. And she's very welcome on these shores. A super popular player here, as is Jie Shin. Look, it's really telling, isn't it? Those foreign marquee players. So Ash Buhai, Jenny Shin, Jie Shin, Danielle Kang. They're all extremely frequent visitors to Australia. Danielle Kang, before she won a major, came out here 2 or 3 years in a row, I think.
Yeah.
And was enormously popular. So there's something about this tournament and the way Australia welcomes these players and the challenge that it presents as well.
Yeah,
I think that keeps them coming, right?
Indeed. And in this case, I think the courses too. I think we're one of the few nations in the world where our National Open would really benefits when it goes to particular courses. Its cachet goes up those years. And this year being Kingston Heath and Victoria, I think that's happened. And I think the women as much as the men. Jenny Shin may have been dreaming of playing in a tournament at Kingston Heath for much of her life, as Rory McIlroy said a couple of years ago that he'd been dreaming about. And this is an opportunity to do it. And fantastic. And you're right. I think our local fans here appreciate that, as they should, because it's fantastic. Time, Logue, to man up. Who are you tipping in the men's Open firstly?
I'm not being particularly brave here. I'm going to go with Cameron Smith.
I am going to go with Mark Leishman, because I watched that round fairly carefully on Sunday, and had he made any putts at all, he would have been well and truly in it. I really like the way he was hitting the ball. He'll like this sort of golf. Been a while between drinks for Mark Leishman. I'll look out for him this week. If he holds a couple of putts, things could happen. All right, the Women's Open.
I'm not really going out on a limb here, Rod. I'm going with Hannah Green.
And I also will go with Hannah Green, as I think everybody should, even perhaps more so than Cam. She's carrying that expectation given the year that she's had and the way that she's had those wins as well. It hasn't been...
Rod, the real question, though, is what would Jimmy pick?
This is exactly what I was about to do. Have you got a Jimmy tip? I don't know how he tips, so I'm struggling with this one.
I do. For the men's, I think Jimmy would pick Minwoo Lee.
Yeah.
We forgot to mention Elvis Smiley in all that conversation as well, by the way.
Yes.
And I just saw a press conference from Elvis Smiley. And I just want to mention, I thought about picking Elvis Smiley. Okay. That's my thought about pick.
Oh, well done. Yes. Good work.
I'm just getting that in there. And yeah, I just saw a press conference from Elvis, and he's just a very composed, mature 22-year-old, and seems very at ease in this environment and with the attention that he's going to have this week. And, you know, we've got this almost a tradition, isn't it, of players getting what used to be the triple crown, but sometimes, you know, the double crown of Australian majors. And it just seems to happen sometimes, right? And Elvis looks like he's got the makings of someone who could pull that off this year at a very young age. So he was my thought about pick. Is Jimmy's pick? He's probably Jimmy's thought about pick too, but I'm telling you, Jimmy's pick would have been Minwoo Lee. Yeah.
Elvis would be my thought about pick too. I was extremely. I remember saying to you when he won the WA Open, I thought he had the sort of. I think I said he had the game to become the world number one. That's quite possible. I do think he showed us enough at the weekend to say that there's nothing that could necessarily stop him becoming a top 10 player in the world. Maybe even sooner than later. I was very impressed with what I saw. He's very good mentally. I don't know Elvis personally. I've actually never met him. I know his mum. I texted his mum after he won. I've never encountered Elvis, but she told me that and she, as everybody knows, is a very successful tennis player. She told me that she sees in him, in his mind, what she has seen in other champion athletes in tennis and whatnot. An ability to take information from all over and sift out what's genuinely not value and keep what is. Difficult thing to do. So, I think Elvis has got a lot. And I think it's also good. He's the sort of character like who will get a bit of attention and publicity wherever he goes. And that's good for Australian golf and for Australia, isn't it? I think we've had a good lot of ambassadors for quite a long time now, and he's going to fit very smoothly into that role over the next decade or two as his career goes on, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which is good. So, yes, a huge shout out to Elvis. Can't say enough about how impressive he is. All right, so you've got Cam Smith, you've thought is Elvis. Jimmy's going with Minwoo Lee. Women's Open, Hannah Green. Thought about in the women's?
Thought about Ash Buhai, a three-peat. Would be pretty exciting.
Okay.
And just quite loud, Ash Buhai was who Jimmy would have picked.
Okay. So Jimmy's gone Ash Buhai as well. I'm going Hannah Green as well. Thought about, I didn't think much about it. Look, I'm going to go with Steph Kyriakou because she could get it done. Why not? I'm going to thought about these don't actually matter. So I don't know why I'm giving it.
Just thought about it just then.
It's exactly right.
That's what it's.
I don't know why we're even bothering. None of this actually counts. Anyway,
the concept of thought about.
Yes, it's really taken on.
That to you.
It's brought a whole new element of to the Standard Golf Kipping podcast. Dark horse among the men's field.
Do we have to do a dark horse?
You do now because I just said so.
Okay. Mark Leishman. I think he's a dark horse.
I think in this category,
I can get away with that.
Yeah, I think in this category, I think particularly about some of those younger players that we've seen up and coming this way. Jack Buchanan is a two-time winner. I feel like
good one.
That's a good dark horse pick. You'd be surprised if it happened, but you kind of wouldn't be either necessarily. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. So I'll go with Jack Buchanan. And a dark horse for the women. This will be a little bit more difficult, I think.
Indeed, that is a little bit more difficult. I'm going to say Aditi Ashok.
Oh, great call. Really good player too, Aditi Ashok. I like that.
Because I was just out watching a bit of golf and I saw her hit a few shots. And I'm very impressed, as always, when I see her.
And I have completely forgotten who I was going to pick, and I don't have the field list in front of me, so I'll go with the TD Ashok as well. We can both have a TD Ashok there. We won't have a thought about for the dark horses. And that's it for the Australian. Look, I know you're down there on site. It always feels like, as I said, the special buzz to me. This week could be something quite special. I think we seem to have the right name players in the mix, and we're at the right courses, and you can't hope but for it to. Of course, we lost a round at the PGA, which is just a tragedy. I mean, people work so hard to organise a golf tournament for so long, and for the weather to come along and steal a day is awful. In many ways, it was really good that Elvis won. That didn't become the story, the fact that the tournament had to be reduced. Can't hope but for a fantastic week this week. It feels like an important one for Australian golf more broadly as well. The product's really on show, so good to see. Now, just before we go, we're going to quickly have a look at, as I said, the Asian Tour is playing the second last or penultimate of their events, the International Series Qatar at the Doha Golf Club. Most people would be familiar with Doha Golf Club or seen it. The Qatar Masters has been played there since 1998 when both the course opened and that tournament started. That's on the European Tour, of course, was the first grass course in Qatar. This is the important business end of the season. I thought and have been saying that John Catlin had this sort of International Series list wrapped up pretty confidently, and that, he was going to completely wrong, as Rob Ops pointed out to me on Twitter last week, or I saw a post about it. It's actually extremely close. The player that wins the International, or is at the top of the International Series order of merit at the end of the year, gets a promotion straight to the Live Golf League. Catlin, and after Catlin missed the cut last week, Ben Campbell finished second. It is now just a couple of 100 points behind. The winning totals, or the winning points on offer for the last two events, are the 450 for first place and then 1,000 for first place. So it's way more volatile than I thought. That will make it interesting. Catlin does have the order of merit wrapped up on the Asian Tour, but it's the Live promotion that they'll be looking for. So Ben Campbell, I think, will be particularly motivated this week, as will Richard T. Lee. Those top three are really in the driver's seat. So that tournament within a tournament idea will, and of course, even if this week, because the points are doubled next week, so you're still going to have it go right to the end. I'm guessing you probably haven't had much of a chance to look at the field here in Qatar, but I've already mentioned the name of the player that I'm going to, and that was Ben Campbell, who, Patrick Reed was a buzzsaw that everybody hit there, shooting 59 in the third round there in Hong Kong and going on to win. But Ben Campbell looked really, really good for the second year in a row in Hong Kong, and I think with the motivation of that potential Live card, if not win, he'll go very close. Have you had a look at the Qatar field, and have you got a tip for us? And if not, we can wrap it up.
No, I have. And with apologies to Mark Hayes, I really enjoyed seeing Patrick Reed win last week. I think golf is a little bit better when you've got him performing well, because you need the heel to.
Well, every movie needs a villain, doesn't it?
You need a villain.
Yeah, it's a really important role, and he plays it brilliantly, as Mark Hayes will attest, as you have just alluded to there. Yes,
he does. And look, he's really, really good to watch. Like, especially when he's on song, he just does fantastic things around the greens, and he can shape the ball. He's a good golfer. I like that. He's got those funny sort of, I don't know, they're not full length arms.
Yes.
That just hang down at just the right length when he's standing over a golf ball. There's something about his stature that is really suited to golf, especially he looks extremely comfortable over a golf ball.
Yes.
And then looks a little bit goofy when he's walking around. Yeah. So
I actually, at the President's Cup in 2019, I remember standing at the range on the first morning, and Dustin Johnson walked past, and Brooks Koepka walked past, and Adam Scott walked past, and Patrick Reed waddled past. And I thought, you can't imagine that they're all athletes in the same pursuit. But you're exactly right. He stood at his spot, did his little stretching routine. His caddy handed him a sandwich. He stood over the ball, and you said, oh, well, that's a universe that's in sync. Everything about that looks exactly as it's supposed to. I couldn't tell you technically, but you know that this guy here can play amazing golf. And then just extraordinary tempo. He started with some short shots. I'd love to like this guy, because the golf, you're right, it's delicious to watch. It really is. But yes, he is somewhat divisive, so there is that, of course.
Yeah.
Is
he
your
ever
tip?
play the game of try and guess your playing partner's handicap when you're on the first tee before they've hit a shot?
Right.
Like, just by the way they take a club out of the bag, or the way they put their glove on, or the way they're squinting down the fairway, or something like that. Patrick Reed, I think you can instantly tell that he's not just a world-class player, but the type of golf he plays, just by the way he picks a club out of the bag and puts his glove on and takes a few practice swings or a little waggle or something like that. He looks like a fantastic sort of touch player.
It's unaggressively aggressive, isn't it? There's nothing aggressive about it, but it is quite an assault or an affront to the other people in the group. I don't know how he does it. It's a gift. There's no shame. It's a talent, no question.
Anyway,
And is it your tip?
Yeah, so I do have a pick from all of that. It's Richard T. Lee. He was a thought about it pick for me on the week that he won a few weeks ago. So I'm graduating him to full-blown pick status. So
excellent work. And he, of course, is third on that list that we just talked about with those that spot on offer on the Live Golf League. So, yes, he will be as motivated as Ben Campbell and indeed John Catlin. And it might be very interesting to watch these three go head-to-head over the next couple of weeks. We can only hope. So, been fabulous to have you aboard, Logue. Thank you for that. And when you do finally get a chance to speak to Jimmy where he might actually be able to listen to you, give him my best. I hope he has a terrific week this week because I know it's going to be a busy one. And I hope you enjoy it down there as well. Really looking forward to getting your updates during the week and then to hear about it next week when you're all back here in Sydney.
Thanks, Rod. Yeah, I'll give my regards to Jimmy. He's probably going to be completely insufferable this week, but, we'll see how we go.
What are you going to do? You need him, He's running the show there. If you want pies and ice creams, you're going to have to go through Jimmy. So hold your tongue until you get the good food. That's it for episode 91 of Playing from the Tips. We'll be back again to do it all again, of course, next week. And you can keep up with all the action from the Australian Open and with what's going on the Asian Tour at the Asia International Series Qatar on the Golf Australia website, golfaustralia.com.au.